The One Punch Man series has a large and varied cast of characters, most of which are shrouded in some sort of mystery, but none are as secretive or as well hidden to fans as Blast. The series does offer crumbs here and there when it comes to his character through other heroes' past, such as his saving of Tatsumaki when she was a child, but nothing very concrete has been offered up as of yet. With that said, let's dive into the number 1 S-rank hero and discuss everything we do know so far. Before we get into his appearances in the anime and manga, let's go over who Blast is as a hero. Although his real name is unknown, Blast could very well be his name or nickname, and he simply decided to just run with it. Similarly to Saitama, Blast is a hero as a hobby and has a day job which hasn't been revealed. In the same way, he has a very bulky suit, almost like a power suit, and a billowy cape to go with his tall frame. He's an older man, likely 40 or so, and has spiked hair and scratches on his suit, as well as a scar on his face. This same scar wasn't there when he first met Tatsumaki. Also, just a quick reminder before we get into Blast's ability to like this video and subscribe for some plot armor in your life today. Now that we know what Blast looks like, let's talk about what he can do. Early on, the One Punch Man series paints him in a way that makes Blast almost sound inhuman in terms of his powers, but some of what he possesses is similar to Saitama again. That is, Blast has enhanced speed, impossibly fast reflexes, as demonstrated when Flashy Flash tries to test him and ends up losing sight of him, and super strength. Most of these things are self-explanatory, but one thing remains, his warp ability. This inexplicable power makes him not only able to teleport to different places, and possibly through time, it allows him to send people or objects through a dimensional portal. As this power isn't explained beyond it being a warp portal ability, we are left with many more questions as to how this was gained and the full extent of it in terms of a means of travel. Additionally, there's the matter of the cubes that Blast owns and if they have something to do with this warp travel of his. Could they be what's powering the ability itself, or maybe what's triggered it? Perhaps it was even given to him through a deal like the one he tried to prevent Saitama from accepting, but this remains to be known. Let's put that aside for now and instead take a deep dive into how Blast has been portrayed so far. With one, the author, purposely trying to keep him a mystery, we only get to know Blast at first through his absence. We get a sense that Blast is too busy to be involved with meetings, like the S-Class one at the Hero Association about the possible end of the world predicted by the late Shibabawa. It's unfortunate she couldn't predict her own death by a cough drop, but that's neither here nor there. Not only is he absent from this important meeting, but Sitch also explains that he was altogether unreachable. Now, this is interesting. Knowing what kind of abilities he has, does this indicate that even though he has a phone or pager, or maybe he doesn't even carry either, that he was in an area outside of Japan's reach, or perhaps the planet itself? This further makes us wonder as to his whereabouts, not only in space but in time. But as we know very little beyond that single line by Sitch, this is all speculation. Later on, long after the threat to the planet is resolved by Saitama, Garo becomes the new big bad, causing damage and injuries across cities. And as this conflict intensifies, the heroes join forces and overwhelm Garo when he's distracted by saving a young boy named Tareo. Eventually, the heroes prove too much for Garo's current form, not yet monsterized as we see later on. And so, Phoenix Man, one of the members from the Monster Association, carries him off and has Elder Centipede take his place in the battle. Just a heads up, Senti Choro is the name used in Viz for the official translation, and Elder Centipede is the unofficial English translation. The Japanese name is Mukade Choro, Centipede Elder, so the Viz version is a combination of the Japanese and English names, and so it's up to you the viewers what you want to call the giant centipede monster. But what does this have to do with Blast? Well, 2 years ago, Blast went up against the same centipede monster and nearly killed him. Why he was left alive isn't explained, but perhaps Elder Centipede got lucky. Phoenix Man discusses this because he can only imagine 4 heroes strong enough to take down Elder Centipede, with Blast being one of them of course. Saitama wasn't known to him and therefore not mentioned. While Phoenix Man talks about Blast, we get our first look at him and it's a shot from behind with him in a very heroic pose. The next time Blast is mentioned is during the Monster Association arc, which the anime has not completely covered yet. During this arc, the heroes are forced to face some of their toughest opponents yet, with a few of them having breakdowns over not being as powerful as they once thought. One of these heroes turns out to be the ever-confident Sweet Mask. During a moment of internal turmoil, Blast is shown through a flashback as Sweet Mask has a breakdown over his failure. The way Blast speaks to him, bent down on one knee, makes it seem as if Sweet Mask was young at the time, or even before his hero and idol days. Blast's cape looks billowy and majestic, and a monster's arm is shown to be severed near them. Besides the fact that Blast appears in this memory as someone both providing a positive influence to him and important to Sweet Mask's life, it also indicates that Blast may have inspired a number of heroes to join the association by doing this hobby of his. Prior to this flashback, Sweet Mask considered killing every hero around him who had witnessed his break in character until Ian reminded him of Blast by taking the same pose and triggering that memory of Blast. The story would have been very different had this flashback not happened. Later, we're spoiled with an insightful look into Tatsumaki and Blast's first encounter. Interestingly, this is also our first full scene with Blast where he's discussed for more than just a moment. 8 years ago, Tatsumaki was in a research facility when a monster attacked. The staff, uncaring for their patients and test subjects, evacuated the building and left her behind in her locked cell. I know it seems like this is pretty heartless, but consider that at this point Tatsumaki already had her psychic abilities and could have broken out had she chosen to do so. Not that it excuses them leaving a little girl behind bars during an emergency though. Expecting to die due to the monster, she accepted her fate and closed her eyes while awaiting death. But before she could be attacked, the monster was destroyed along with the door to her cell by being punched through it. Blast arrived, introducing himself as someone with a regular job who was working as a hero for fun. At this time, he was also already in possession of one of the cubes he collects, but we'll get more into that later. He asks why she didn't use her power to escape, but she lied and told him it was gone. Blast didn't fall for this, whether because of experience or through knowing how to read people, or maybe even because of his warp abilities having shown him events that haven't come to pass yet. He stated matter-of-factly that he knew she only pretended her power was gone in hopes that it would allow her freedom from this testing facility, because if she was no longer of interest or use, why would they keep her? But as she cried, insisting that no one needed her, not even her parents who sold her to the facility, Blast reminded her about her precious younger sister. This again brings up a question. Why does Blast know about Fubuki? Most heroes wouldn't know about a victim's background, especially not their family and their abilities. Had Blast been aware of this facility and allowed them to keep Tatsumaki until this point, or had he seen this information through his dimensional warping? This is not addressed, and Tatsumaki didn't question why he knew either, as she was too emotionally distraught to focus on the details. As Blast prepared to leave her now that she had her freedom, he patted her head and encouraged her to take care of her family. He offered her one piece of advice: those who possess great power must never expect someone to save them. And as broad as this may seem, Tatsumaki applies Blast's advice to many dire situations she faces in the future. Let's go back to the present time. In the middle of the war with the monsters, while the majority of the heroes are above ground dealing with the Monster Association threats, Saitama and Flashy Flash and a small monster named Monoko are below ground deep within the earth. Up to this point, they had been struggling to free Flashy Flash's sword from where it was trapped between the rocks, but with its release and unfortunate damage, a new opening is revealed. For the readers, we can see into the hole and know there is a large, ominous being hidden in the darkness. But for the heroes, it's so dark and impossible to brighten, even with the use of Monaco's strange eye abilities. Suddenly, a voice speaks to them, offering the chance to obtain a vast power as long as they're willing and worthy to become this creature's vessel. Previously, Saitama had helped Flashy Flash free his sword by removing a strange heavy cube from the wall and letting it fall carelessly behind them. Now, the voice indicates the cube and tells them that simply touching it would grant them the power it speaks of. This mysterious being doesn't seem trustworthy to Saitama, and he threatens it instead, despite it seeming like a god of some sort. At the same moment, something akin to a round dimensional rift opens up behind them. It's Blast saying, "Good, I'm not too late." Initially, it would seem like Blast was referring to being in time to help them get back to the surface to aid in the fight, but he was actually worried about them touching the cube that the voice left them. Blast now looks very different from Tatsumaki's flashback, sporting dark sunglasses, a scar between his eyes, and scratches all over his power suit. His hair has changed to also a much lighter color over the years. Blast would then go on to explain that it's good that no one has accepted the deal yet, and that the cube is a transmitter that allows you to speak through a space warp. He also claims to collect these cubes for fun. Somehow, in the span of a minute, we are given more information about both Blast and the world than we had known up to this point. This means that not only are those cubes somehow similar to how Blast's power works, warping through space, but that he knew about the mysterious voice offering deals to strong heroes, and possibly even the result if he had arrived too late. This points to Blast somehow being able to see or know things beyond what the other heroes can, and wanting to prevent certain outcomes from coming to be. But whether it's because he's already experienced them, or because he's seen it happen to others is another question that's left unanswered. It might even be due to the team that he's associated with, which we'll be getting into more later. Back to the scene itself, despite Blast's name being clearly labeled at the front of his suit, only the voice knows who he is when he arrives. With his same dimensional warp ability, Blast takes the cube from the ground and sends it through the dark circle of power it appears into and goes somewhere else. This is also another one of those unclear things about Blast. At this point, Blast was becoming more of a legend than an actual person, so Flashy Flash doubts that it's him and feels the need to test him with his own power. Keep in mind that Flashy Flash is one of the fastest heroes in the world, not including Saitama, who hasn't really tested his full limits as he's never needed to go that far. And when he uses his top speed against Blast, not only does Blast avoid his attack, but he stood directly behind him whispering for him to calm down. as if putting the fear of God into Flashy Flash. He starts to drip with nervous sweat and Blast just goes on as if nothing had happened. This area where the voice found them also happens to be a place where time passes more slowly, giving them ample time to reach the surface and join the fight. Blast lets them know this and encourages them to get involved, even providing the transportation to get them to the surface. You guessed it, they're going to use his dimensional travel warp portal thing. There's not really a name yet, so you can call it as you will for now. Even Saitama doesn't seem to comprehend Blast's power, as he describes this kind of travel as weird. Before they leave, Blast takes note of Manako, the monster with them, and wonders why they have it with them. As his gaze turns more fierce, ready to destroy Manako if needed, Saitama simply explains that he's their guide and flashlight. Blast seems appeased by that and tells them they'll be parting ways, but they will meet again at some point. His use of words here is vague, describing either that they will meet again in another dimension or perhaps another time, or maybe simply in the future. But you can never be too sure with Blast. Blast will then begin to create a strange light, his fists join together, and the symbol of infinity appears on his palms. This opens up a portal allowing them to join him inside the dark space created by his ability. Whether this is how he normally travels, or this is how he needs to create the warp space to include others, is just another mystery, to be honest. With Tatsumaki needing to use her full power, she doesn't have time to worry about the heroes underground, namely Flashy Flash and Saitama. But just as her attack was launched, she says she felt part of the underground space being warped to swallow someone, transferring them to another dimension. Finally, we have a bit more clarity as to Blast's power, with it requiring the bending of space and opening of dimensions rather than simple holes that lead from one place to another. Needless to say, when she contemplates whether it was Blast who did that, we have confirmation that it continued the scene from underground. After the battle with Psychos, there are still more monsters to battle, including Homeless Emperor, Ugly, and so on, and Tatsumaki would insist on being involved. Her sister, Fubuki, tries desperately to stop her by using her psychic powers, but all Tatsumaki does is reject the idea of being helped because of what Blast told her 18 years ago. Fubuki thinks to herself that in spite of her sister's life being saved by Blast, a curse lies upon her heart. Although this doesn't feature Blast himself, it is heavily related to his actions from the past when he saved Tatsumaki. His words were likely meant more as a means of survival for a child who was unwilling to fight and use her powers back then, but Tatsumaki never let go of them. It became so engraved in her as a person that even now, with appreciation and recognition, Tatsumaki still refuses to trust anyone with her life and won't back down no matter the consequences on her body. If you consider Blast's character up to this point, the little we've seen, it seems unlikely he would encourage her to destroy her body and to upset her little sister with this reckless behavior. But that might just be how Blast appears to me. After a lot of heroes are taken down in this battle, King's one of the few left to fight against the remaining monsters. As Vomited Ugly and Platinum S close in on King, who is evidently shaking in his boots, Garo breaks out of his monsterization somewhat and launches an attack. He chooses to follow his heart and attacks directly through Ugly's guts to keep him from melting Bang like he was planning to. But who appears right at this moment? Our man of the hour, Blast, and his warp portal show up just behind Garo. He drops off Flashy Flash and Saitama in an unceremonious way, having accomplished his goal of just getting them to the fight. He's nowhere to be seen afterward, and that's because Blast's priority lies with checking on Tatsumaki. That and preventing the strange godlike voice from offering one of its sketchy deals to her. During the three-way fight between Garo, Flashy Flash, and Platinum S, Blast appears by Tatsumaki's side just as he was with Sweet Mask in his flashback. Blast tells her she's done her best, but that he can give her more power if she would want it from him. But even in her weakened state, Tatsumaki can tell that it's not the real Blast, but the god that has tempted Saitama and Flashy Flash with his cube in the underground area. Its face morphs into something else when it's found out, and it disappears very quickly. The real Blast appears then from within his warp power in the same place, kneeling next to Tatsumaki. He's glad that she's drove away the mysterious creature and proud of how much she's grown. He smiles, with her still unconscious, disappointed with his timing and how this could have gone wrong very quickly. While everyone freaks out about Blast being there in person, he tells them, "I stopped it at the last minute, but due to the effects of the cubes, I allowed it to make contact while I fell into a gap time." And here we have evidence that not only does Blast travel through space, but also through time. Unless it's due to the cube that there was a lag in time, just as the area below ground was said to have time that passed slower. Despite being someone who travels through warp portals and does his own thing for the most part, Blast knows who King is, just as he knew Flashy Flash in the underground passage. Later, Blast would then pick up Tatsumaki and hand her to King while he asks her to take care of him. Although his help would make this fight that much easier, he likely knows or has seen the outcome and isn't worried about their victory against the remaining monsters. At least that's how he seems. Instead, Blast opens up another dimensional portal, this time revealing the silhouettes of a number of people waiting for him within the darkness. Two things come to mind with this new information. One, Blast works with a team of people who likely have the same goals as him and know about the cubes. And two, if he's offering support, that means he's not the strongest among them, but a necessary team member nonetheless. This is somewhat hinted at since in the webcomic, Psychos refers to Blast as the Bishop during her fight with Tatsumaki, meaning he's an important chess piece but not the most important one. However, as this isn't mentioned in the manga, perhaps it means something else entirely, relating to time rather than power levels. The final crumb of information that Blast offers in the manga so far is that he doesn't fight alone, which makes it sound like he's part of some Avengers team or Guardians of the Galaxy type gig. But considering he said he only does hero work as a hobby, how does he still have time to do his day job with all this craziness involving cubes and warp portals? Perhaps that's why he only offers support and doesn't consider himself like the leader of the group of heroes. And that's all we have for now in terms of anime and manga clues into the life of Blast. Until next time, keep that plot armor on you. I'm KJ. Have a great day. Goodbye.